Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. Tonight we're going to talk about John McCain, who died recently at the age of 81. He was a true American war hero, a six-term Republican senator from Arizona, and an unsuccessful presidential candidate in 2000 and 2008. It's safe to say John McCain is an American legend, and my closest comparison is with John Glenn, whose podcast we've done. Another American legend. Both men went into politics, they were both senators, and both had that legendary status tarnished slightly by the unsavory nature of the political world. For me, the irony of John McCain was he was often criticized at moments when he should have been praised, and he was often praised at moments when he should have been criticized. We're going to go through some of the key moments of John McCain's life, and I'm going to concentrate on his war experience and being a prisoner in the Hanoi Hilton at the expense of shortening some of his later political career. Some of this war experience is familiar to you if you've listened to the Jeremiah Denton podcast. If not, I refer you to it, and John McCain got a mention in that one as a cellmate of his in the Hanoi Hilton. Well, both John McCain's father and grandfather were distinguished admirals in the United States Navy. His grandfather, Admiral John Sidney McCain Sr., was a pioneer of aircraft carriers, and he was in the front row of officers aboard the battleship Missourio in Tokyo Bay when the Japanese signed the documents of surrender to General Douglas MacArthur in 1945. His father was a decorated submarine commander in World War II. He was influential in political affairs as the post-war Navy's chief information officer and liaison with Congress. Senators, representatives, and military brass were often guests at his home. Raised to full admiral, he was the commander of American naval forces in Europe, and from 1968 to 1972 of all American forces in the Pacific, including those in the Vietnam War theater. His father and grandfather were the first father and son full admirals in American naval history, and they both have Navy destroyers named after them. John McCain's career did not start out so auspiciously. He was a badass Marlon Brando type screw-up in high school in Alexandria, Virginia, and then in the Navy.
I was an undistinguished member of the class of 1958. And I was as relieved to graduate fifth from the bottom of my class as the Naval Academy was to see me go.
Fortunately, you didn't have to be at the top of your class to become a fighter pilot in the late 50s and early 60s, and that's when it was a quite attractive job for young Studley graduates.
That's what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to go to combat. One of the great things about being a fighter pilot is you're sure that everybody else is going to get shot down, but not you.
Well, it was a great job until the Vietnam War broke out, and then being a fighter pilot became one of the most dangerous jobs in the military. In July of 1967, he suffered burns on the carrier Forrestal when a missile from another jet hit his fuel tank. 134 people were killed. 3 months later came the seminal event in his military career and perhaps in his life. Again, for more details on this, I refer you to the Jeremiah Denton podcast, but here is an ABC documentary in 1999 with John McCain discussing what happened in 1967 and afterward.
October 26, 1967, 31-year-old John McCain is flying the Navy's A-4 Skyhawk, top speed 670 miles an hour.
McCain was on a bombing run over Hanoi. He had a target that he had been assigned. The anti-aircraft fire was very heavy that day.
The mission? To knock out a power plant in the capital city. But the North Vietnamese have targets too.
Surface-to-air missile hit my airplane and hit the right wing and took it off, and I went into a very violent spiral downward.
McCain ejects, breaking both arms and a knee in the process. He descends into the waiting arms of the enemy.
I came down in a lake near the center of the city of Hanoi. As I came to the surface, the Vietnamese group of them came out and pulled me in.
He was met by an angry mob of civilian Vietnamese who resented the fact that he was trying to drop bombs on their city, as anyone would. And they beat him up, and they punched him, and they kicked him, and they were treating him extremely badly.
And then they threw me in the back of a truck and took me to the prison that we know of as the Hanoi Hilton.
You walk in these iron doors, it says Maison Centrale, Central House, and then there's a courtyard, and then there are corridors with cells.
They called the doctor in, and the doctor took my pulse and shook his head. Interrogator in English said, "It's too late." Then I thought perhaps I was going to die.
But once again, the legendary family name is about to shape John McCain's future.
My father saved my life because some hours after that, the door of the cell burst open and the interrogator came in and said, "Your father is a big admiral." And we're going to take you to the hospital. So he really did. They had found out from our wire services.
It is, however, a double-edged sword. The North Vietnamese now have a bargaining chip.
At that point, they invited a French film crew in to film him, to sort of use as propaganda to show that they had captured this famous American and that they were treating him nicely.
How old are you? Every point. It's tough watching that.
Yeah, I don't like it. I don't enjoy watching it.
You're in obvious great pain there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very unpleasant memory.
Are you married? Yes. Have your children? 3.
In the background, the interrogator is saying, tell them you want the war to stop. And that's why you hear me say, that's all I have to say. Interrogator then said, tell him that it's an evil war and you want the war to stop. And the Frenchman turned and said, I think he said enough.
8 months after his capture, the Viet Cong make a self-serving offer to send McCain home. It is one the Navy captain cannot accept.
What bothered me most about it was that I knew that if I had accepted the release, then they would go to other prisoners and say, see, your country doesn't care about you. They only care about the admiral's sons. And I knew that that's what they would do. And I knew I couldn't do that to my fellow prisoners.
The decision comes with severe consequences.
They moved him into solitary confinement, where he stayed for 2 years. If you've known John McCain at all, you know that the one thing he loves is to be around people. This was possibly the worst punishment they could have ever done to him.
The beatings are constant. McCain's only escape? The sounds of tapping, coded messages from other prisoners.
They developed a code by which they could talk to each other. It was a tap code, and they tapped on the pipes in their cell. And they did the alphabet. A was 1, B was 2, C was 3.
I'll never forget the tapping to each other and the leadership and inspiration that I got from those people who were far better and stronger than I am.
But the brutality of the North Vietnamese is unrelenting.
They would hang him from his arms, yank his arms out of their sockets. They would beat him with sticks. They would engage in mental torture as well.
He doesn't wave like this. He waves like this. And that's because he can't lift his arms over his shoulders due to the torture that he suffered at the hands of the Vietnamese.
4 days of intense beatings result in McCain reading a scripted confession. He is tormented by his perceived failure to uphold the military's honor code.
I saw people, and I know people, that underwent far more severe brutality than I experienced, and they didn't crack, and they were my role models. I did not live up to the standards that I'd hoped that I could live up to.
I don't know that he ever forgave himself. The other prisoners did, and everyone else pretty much did, but I'm not sure he ever forgave himself.
And while a son suffers in prison, a father suffers in silence.
He never asked for any special favors for his son, but every year at Christmas, he would go to the demilitarized zone, which was the strip of land between South and North Vietnam, and he would just stare into that country that was holding his son. He never talked about it. He never said what he was thinking, but he did it every year for 5 years.
When he is released from solitary, John McCain's other heroes are waiting for him.
The other prisoners in the camp nursed him back to health. They helped him. They cleaned his wounds. They spoon-fed him because he couldn't lift his arms. And they nursed him back to relative health.
They said, get up, go back into the fight. You're not defeated. Go back into the fight.
And so many years later, another powerful message delivered by a fellow POW in that familiar tapping code.
GBU, which means God bless you, which is obviously the tap code that we used, and we'd always sign off with that when we would finish our messages to each other.
Well, John McCain knew that he would never become an admiral, both because of his war wounds and because of his contentious nature. So he ultimately went into politics, first local in Arizona and then national, and he became a Republican senator from the state in 1986 and served 6 terms.
My service here is the most important job I've had in my life. And I'm so grateful to the people of Arizona for the privilege, for the honor of serving here and the opportunities it gives me to play a small role in the history of the country that I love.
He started out a Reagan Republican, but he quickly became a maverick in the Republican Party, albeit one who still got along with his Senate colleagues.
It's well known that I have not been elected Miss Congeniality in the United States Senate, nor with the administration. I've been a member of the United States Senate for 30 years. Sometimes I've let my passion rule my reason. Sometimes I made it harder to find common ground because of something harsh I said to a colleague. Sometimes I wanted to win more for the sake of winning than to achieve a contested policy. I disagree with the leadership of my party on certain issues, but I don't disagree with them personally. We have a fundamental disagreement on policy. If you stick to that, then you can walk over and shake hands with somebody afterwards after the fight is over, and you move on.
One of the marks against McCain as a senator was he was involved in the Keating 5 scandal. 5 senators who helped Charles Keating in a savings and loan fraud. Keating went to jail. For the senators, it was unethical but not illegal, but it was a stain on McCain's character.
I created an appearance of impropriety by attending a meeting with 4 other senators with 4 regulators.
I should mention that John Glenn was also one of the Keating 5. Brief mention of his presidential candidacies, which are a footnote in his career. He ran for the Republican nomination for president in the year 2000. It was a contentious campaign, and he lost a bitter struggle to George W. Bush. Bush, of course, served 2 terms, and in 2008, McCain came back and he did win the nomination. He didn't run an especially adept campaign, and it was beset by bad luck. He took a calculated gamble with Sarah Palin as his running mate that didn't work out. And even so, he was reasonably close to Barack Obama in September when the financial crisis hit. And despite his efforts to pull the Republicans together during the financial crisis, he never had a chance after that. He lost handily in November.
After I lost, I slept like a baby.
Yeah?
Sleep 2 hours, wake up and cry. Sleep 2 hours, wake up and cry.
It just wasn't in the cards for John McCain to be president. At the time of his death, he got a lot of praise from the left because he took on Donald Trump, who made stupid comments about him, like, "I only respect guys who didn't get shot down." That praise was from the same people who made every manner of bad comment about John McCain when he was running for president. I said he got criticized when he should have been praised. He got praised when he should have been criticized. He was part of that generation of Vietnam vets who were disrespected when they came home, and that was wrong. He should have been acknowledged as a national hero then. He escaped some criticism for the seamier aspects of his domestic life. Of course, politics can sully anybody, even a national hero, as the Keating 5 scandal did, which was pretty much forgotten. He ran generally decent campaigns for president in 2000 and 2008, and he acted generally honorably in the Senate after the Keating 5 scandal, which he never got enough credit for until he became an enemy of Donald Trump, which is disingenuous by its practitioners. John McCain had his flaws, without question, but what he was a man of service and a distinguished military hero. And as time went on, he became a man of principle. Overall, I'd say the ledger says we need more people like John McCain. Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps. John McCain once said, "I do not know anyone alive. I've never heard of anyone who is as lucky as I am. I crashed airplanes. I was a terrible disciplinary problem at the Naval Academy. I managed to avoid being killed in a fire on the Forrestal. I was shot down. I had the honor of winning the nomination for the presidency of the United States, the honor of serving in the United States Senate, and now following in the footsteps of one Barry Goldwater as chairman of the Armed Services Committee. I am exuberant and so fortunate. I'm telling you, I wake up every morning and go to bed every night saying, 'Thank you, God.'" Well, Senator McCain, it's we who should be thanking you. And in that vein, we're going to play "This Is My Country" by the Mormon Tabernacle Choir as a final tribute to John McCain.
I fell in love with my country when I was a prisoner in someone else's. I wasn't my own man anymore. I was my country's. I've been in my country's service since I was 17 years old. I neither know nor want any other life, for I can find no greater honor than service.